Hey guys, and welcome to my incredibly complex productivity routine. In this video, I'm going to share with you everything I do to make sure that I never actually spend any time working, and I spend all my time trying to be more productive. And that is how I use just 54 different apps and only spend £1,150 a month to be ultra productive. No, seriously, there's no reason to be that guy, and honestly, you don't even need a complex productivity system. At the end of the day, the only reason to have some form of system in place is to actually get work done, not to spend all your time moving information around a bunch of different tools. Now, I'm an absolute sucker for this type of video, but I always find that they're either way too complex and people are moving information around all day and just spending time inside the app because they have a little promotion code for the app, or they just like spending time inside of an app instead of doing work, or they're really simple and just don't cater to my needs because I have a few different things going on at once. So over the past few months, I've been testing out a simple system that still hits everything I need to get done without requiring me to spend loads of time just managing tasks and moving things around. And in this video, I'm going to share with you how I've gone from this guy over to this guy. Now for me, my attention is split into three main areas. There's my company demand flow, there's creative work, so there's YouTube channel, newsletter, and just writing in general. And then there's also personal life. And in those areas, my productivity system consists of a place to manage tasks, do email, message people, keep a calendar, read articles and books, take notes, and write. So whereas in the past, I tried to do this all in one place because to me, that seemed like the simplest option. So what I try to do is do all of this inside of Notion, but the problem is that Notion doesn't do any of it that well. And the worst part of this is I found it overwhelming as shit to have everything inside of one app. So I want to use the best tool for the job in each area, and because ultimately it is my job to get things done efficiently, I'm okay paying some money for some apps, but generally I try to avoid it. And even this incredibly simple system for me might be way too complex for you because you might not have as many things that you need to do. So let's start by jumping into how I manage tasks, and that all starts on the original OS, which is just a piece of paper. And for me, I use these basic cards from Baron Fig. And with each of these cards, all I do every morning is get one of these cards, write the date at the top of the piece of paper, and then just go along and chronologically add what I'm going to get done that day. I'll then take a second card at the start of the week, and then I'll add what I want to get done that week. Typically, I'll try and make these output orientated, so the things that I want to get done and the output that's actually going to move me forward. Because if I don't do that, I'll find myself just doing a lot of busy work, the kind of things that just keep you busy but never really move anything forward. So every week what I'll do is I'll write out that on a piece of paper, and then I will just stick it onto my desktop and make sure I have it as a reference and I can always see it as I'm working. Now the second part to how I manage tasks is inside of Things 3. Now for me, Things 3 is my favorite to-do app, but honestly they all kind of do the same thing, they just look slightly different. And I don't really use a task manager like most people would use a task manager. For me, more than anything, it's just a place to store information and then reference it in future. So you'll see in here, I have some tasks for today, but for me, all of the tasks that I'm actually going to get done will live on a piece of paper. Then maybe 2 times a day, I'll come in here first thing in the morning to see, okay, what things are top of mind, what things should I be working on? And then at the very end of the day, I'll come into here and check off the things that I've got done. But more than anything, the main way I use this is kind of just a place to store information that's inside of my brain. The inbox tab up here, you can see I have 35 different items in here. This is really a look inside my brain, and none of this will really make sense to a lot of people, but for me, it's just a place to put things I might need to reference in future or things that I might actually need to get done. Now, for example, you can see inside of here, there is a quote from Stephen Pressfield, which I just thought was a good quote. There is a random idea here, which I was thinking about when I signed up to someone's newsletter, and I was prompted to sign up to a bunch of others. I was like, why does anyone need to do this? And like, what's the point? I would have gone over there and signed up if I wanted to. This is maybe something I'll write about. Maybe I'll tweet about it. Who knows? It was in my head, and all I did was use the quick capture inside of Things 3, wrote it down, and then it just disappeared into Things 3. And if I wanted to reference it in future, that's what I would do. Now, besides that, I'm not really using too many of the features inside of here. As you can see, what I do is I kind of roughly organize it by the things that I'm working on, the kind of projects we have at the minute. But really, it's just a way for me to get everything out of my brain, and then I'll delete a bunch of this because I don't really want a lot of this information. It's just little things I'm thinking about in the moment, which I don't necessarily need. I just need somewhere to quickly reference them and then potentially take action on them, delete them, or use them for a piece of content. Now, the third part to my task management system, because every task management system obviously needs 3 different parts, is Clickup. Now you can see inside of here, I'm actually still on the trial plan of this because we just moved everything in the agency over from Asana to Clickup because Asana's kind of limited and costs a lot of money. Inside of here, what we do is we have templates for every single project we'll have inside the agency. And this will be the main task and then the subtasks that are involved with going from the very beginning of a project all the way to the end of the project. Now, more than anything, it's just a way to organize projects and make sure that every single step gets done and then assigned to the correct person inside of here. So I don't personally manage many of my own tasks inside of here. As you can see, they're inside of things and then typically just on a piece of paper. But this is a great way to see an overview of the company and keep everyone aligned. And yeah, it's just like a pretty basic task manager. Like, it just does everything it needs to do. It's very good for collaboration. Tries to be Notion a little bit. It tries to be all the other apps. It's good, but ultimately all we need it for is a way to manage collaboration between multiple people and make sure that projects are getting done. Now, the second part of this system is getting email done. And previously I was using Superhuman for this, but I just found it so hard to justify paying $30 a month for basically just a skin on top of Gmail. And instead just went back to using basic Gmail, but with one different. And that is a little tool called Simplify Gmail. You can see inside of here, my Gmail looks a little bit different to the normal Gmail layout. And what this little tool does is it essentially just changes the CSS. I think it's maybe like £2 a month, which I'm happy to pay for because I really hate the look of ordinary Gmail. And you can see here, if I turn this off, this is what it normally looks like, which just like wants to burn my retinas. And I turn it back on and it's nice, calm, and peaceful. Now, there's not really much to say about Gmail because it's very basic, but for me, one of the main things I do is make sure that I use keyboard shortcuts to speed up the process. Now, when I come inside of here, you can see I'm inside this email. If I hit A, that's going to reply all to everyone in the thread. And then if I hit E, it's just going to archive the email. And this helps me just get through email pretty quickly. It's pretty standard. It's just a nicer email to look at. So this next piece of the system is messaging. And for me, what I need is to message clients, freelancers, and team members. So for this, what we do is we use Slack, and everyone is inside of Slack. Every client gets a Slack channel set up, and that's where all communication happens. We try not have any communication really inside of email once a project starts, because then it's just so fragmented. And then with everyone else, it's inside of Slack. And obviously Slack is pretty standard. Most people have used Slack, but it just gets the job done. I had previously tried to use a tool called texts.com, which pulls in Slack, your texts, WhatsApp, and pretty much every messaging app into one place. And I did like it because it meant I actually replied to people, because I'm very bad at replying to people, especially text. But it just kept failing with Slack, and some of the integrations didn't work very well, so I didn't end up continuing to use it. But if they fix that, I think I might go back to text.com, because it was just a good place to see all the messages that you should reply to, and it actually made me reply to text messages. Now, for me, the biggest benefit of having all my work inside of Slack is that when I want to stop working, I just close Slack. And another thing that I do is never have Slack notifications on, because if I did have Slack notifications, I'd just never get any work done. Now, this next piece of the system is a place to manage a calendar. And for me, I use a tool called Fantastical. And the main reason I use Fantastical is because inside this app, you can natively send over calendar invites for meetings. Now, all I have to do to set up a meeting in here is just set out a time that I want that meeting to happen, give it a title, hit this little drop down here, add Google Meet. I also think they have like Zoom and other things, but I just use Google Meet. And then you can just add the invite inside of here, and then it automatically sends. So I don't have to go to multiple places to schedule this. And it's just nice to do it on a native desktop app. Besides that, it pretty much just works like a typical calendar app. It looks kind of nice. For me, the way I use my calendar is to only plan like on the actual morning of the day. So you can see I don't really have too much in advance planned. The only things that live on here for a long period of time are these calls, and then things that have to happen at a specific time. So you can see here, like at the start of this week, the only things I really had booked in would have been these calls I had, and then also things which are like long standing, like date night on Wednesday. And for me, I don't use time blocking particularly religiously. All I do is I write out my day on my piece of paper. Then I think roughly how long are these things gonna take? And I'll just roughly put that onto a calendar so I can kind of visually see what my day is going to look like. But I don't really follow this religiously. I just kind of use it as like a rough estimate. And the next piece of this productivity system is reading. And for me, reading is typically articles and then books. And there's 3 places that I do this. First is with articles, and I pretty much read everything inside of Readwise's app called Reader. And for me, this is by far the best Read It Later app. Previously, I'd used Instapaper and Pocket, but they're just okay, whereas Reader is really, really good. What I'll do is when I find things from the internet, I will just save them inside of Readwise, and I'll come here when I have a little bit of time, usually when I'm sitting on the toilet, and I'll just read the things I've saved into here. Now, one of the biggest benefits of this over the other tools is the ability to save PDFs in here and actually highlight these PDFs and be able to read them natively natively inside the app. The other thing that's really nice about this is that it just formats things like tweet threads really well, and you can also watch videos and then take notes based on the transcription of the video. Now you can see inside of here, I just save like the most random things that I find interesting. For example, here is the CEO of Ryanair's Wikipedia page, and I saved this just because there was one interesting piece here. And then with this, what I did is highlight it, and then Readwise sends that over to my note system, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then for physical books, I'll split that between reading on Kindle and then also reading physical book. Now, again, everything here is linked to my Readwise system. So whenever I read on the Kindle, if I take a highlight, then it'll end up inside Readwise, which will then send it over to my notes app. And then when I read physical books, you can see I actually add different tabs inside of here, and I highlight different pieces of the book. And then what I'll do is use the phone app for Readwise, and that'll put it into my overall system, and then it'll send it over to my notes app, which leads us on to the next piece of the system, which is my notes app. And for my note-taking app, I use a tool called Reflect. And the reason I use Reflect is because I really like the idea of networked thinking. Now inside of here, every single day, I just have a daily note. And then inside that daily note, I'll just add random things I need to reference throughout the day. Sometimes I'll journal in here, sometimes I won't write anything. Really for me, this is just a blank piece of paper that I can always reference on my phone or my computer. Then whenever I'm reading something or I want to take notes, Readwise will pull that information inside of here. But the reason I like the networked thinking approach over actually just like normal note-taking apps is because I never actually have to see the notes, because personally I just find it way too overwhelming to have like a really detailed note-taking system. And I just think it's over the top because most of the time you don't even need to reference it. Instead, what I do whenever I'm writing something is I'll just use the search in here and I'll search different terms to find things I want to reference, which then makes writing a lot easier because I don't have to start from a blank page. So for example, if I want to reference a quote from Stephen Pressfield, then I could just type in Stephen Pressfield. At the bottom of this page, I can see all the references to him. Then I could go over to this book here, so Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit, and here are all the highlights I made inside that book. And then the other way that I use this is I'll just search specific terms. So for example, if I wanted to write an article on productivity, then what I could do is just type it in. It's not coming up straight away. And here we go. I've got all the things I've written about productivity inside of here. And I don't have to organize anything. I don't have to use tags or anything like that. It all just sits inside of here. So for example, I can see that in this book here, there was a reference to productivity. I can see that in this edition of my newsletter, I wrote something about productivity. Maybe I'm writing an article and I want to look for this book, and I'm like, okay, they reference productivity in this book. I can then see like all the highlights I have of the book, which then can be used as little pieces for articles and ideas just to get things started. Now, the final piece of my system is the writing piece. And I've already mentioned that most of my writing actually happens just inside of Reflect. But then what will happen once I start writing inside of Reflect, when it comes time to share that with someone, everything will go inside of Notion. And this is personally what I think Notion is best for. I think Notion is really good at organizing information and sharing it amongst people, but besides that, I don't really use it for much else. Now, for example, here you can see the script for this video, the rough outline for this video. This is then shared amongst the team, so we can edit from this and I can read off this Notion list. And then the other way that I'm using Notion is really just to reference information for myself. So there's just some rough goals here, the projects that I'm working on, just little pieces of information I want to reference for. And then finally, in the company, I also use Notion to kind of share things that I'm writing, like SOPs, and then we just generally have project information inside of here. I don't really use Notion too much, but more than anything, it's just a place to reference information. And it's also a place where I share my writing with other people. And that is absolutely everything to my kind of simple productivity system. Obviously, there's quite a lot of pieces involved still with this simple system, but ultimately there is a lot of complexity to the work that I do. So for me at the minute, this is as simple as I can get it and still function and not spend too much time inside of the app. Now you can find all of the tools I talked about in the video description. And if you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe for more videos on entrepreneurship and self-development.